Okay, so this is our get together, if you will, for the fourth week of class. Um, and I'm just here to answer questions, clarify anything, and so forth. So, what's different about this week, aside from the fact that we had a holiday yesterday on Monday, is that not only do you have your reflective essay that's due on Saturday, but you also have the first draft of your narrative essays also due. So that's different from the previous weeks as far as the expectations. I did get a question last night that someone texted me um, as far as with regard to the discussion board. So, and I think I mentioned this in maybe last week's check-in, but I want to clarify also. So the discussion board, the question that the gentleman asked was, what day of the week is the discussion board stuff due? There is no sort of set due date and so forth with regard to the discussion board. The discussion board is there to spark ideas, basically, to spark ideas and to spark conversation. So the idea is that you want to participate on the discussion board with the expressed intent that not only are you sharing information with the people in your groups and so forth, and you're building that connection with your groups, because and that becomes important because those are the people that you will be drawing upon for your peer review. And peer review, we're going to start next week. So I'll mention a little bit about that here in a moment. But so the idea is that you participate on the discussion board to spark ideas for your own work and to sort of hone those ideas and to inspire others in your group, as well as to build that confidence, to build that relationship with those relationships with the people in your groups, and also to be inspired by what those people might put on the discussion board. But in terms of there being any formality to the discussion board, there really isn't. But you do need to be participating on the discussion board because that's where you're going to develop that connection with the folks in your group. Now, the idea is where you benefit from the discussion board, aside from getting those ideas for your work, honing those ideas that you may have sort of in seed form prior to looking at the discussion board activities and looking at what the people in your groups are doing and so forth. So the way that you benefit from having worked on the discussion board in a tangible way, right? The tangible benefit is that your work in the discussion board should figure into your weekly reflection. In other words, when you reflect upon the effort that you put in the course for the week, you can specifically evaluate, what you've done on the discussion board. Okay, that's it. So for example, a number of people, not I shouldn't say a substantial number, but a number of people had issue in the week two reflection, for example, reaching two pages on the reflection. And 2 pages is the minimum. 2 pages is the bare minimum on that reflection. Some people you can get 3 to 4 pages of reflection without a problem, but some people were having an issue hitting that 2-page mark. If you're working on the discussion board, for example, that's less of a problem, because you have more to talk about. You have more effort that you put into more tangible effort that you can then evaluate, right? So that's the tangible benefit of the discussion board. The discussion board itself is not assessed, in a traditional manner, but you can talk about it, and you should talk about it in your weekly reflections, right? Also, just to reiterate, and I've said this before, but just to reiterate, the questions on the with regard to the weekly reflections that I post at the end of the prompts for the weekly reflections, those are suggestions, right? You don't necessarily have to engage in those directly, and you don't necessarily have to engage in every one of them, okay? So don't feel like, oh, well, and also you don't just have to pick one. So don't feel like, oh, well, I, answered the first question in the on the prompt, so that's all I have to do. No, that's not the idea. The idea is that you, as the prompt explains, the idea is that you holistically delve into the effort that you put into the course for the week, and then also, as I've mentioned, how various aspects of life influence that effort, right? So you may begin writing about drafting your essay and so forth, but that may evolve, right, into a discussion of something going on in your life, like, for example, if you have to assist, a number of people have written about having to assist siblings and other folks in your families with their own online education. So it may evolve into a discussion about that, and that's perfectly fine, because that also ties into your effort into the course and so forth. But the reflection should be framed with the idea of this is the effort that you're putting into the course, and here's what's influencing it and so forth. And again, each week will be different. It's not going to be the same every week. For example, you may have a particular event that occurs during the week that really sort of frames the entire week. So of course you're going to be writing about that, because not only does it affect your effort in the course, but it affects everything going on in your life and so forth. So all of that stuff, that's all understandable, and that's all up for inclusion, right? Potential inclusion in the reflection. So yeah, but as far as the discussion board is meant to generate ideas, it's meant to build camaraderie, and it's meant to generate discussion to enter into your reflections. Now, when we do peer review, changing the topic slightly, when we do peer review next week, so the idea is that this week, and I do want to reiterate, and I'll when I do my weekly and my Wednesday announcement tomorrow, I will reiterate this, but it's really important that you turn in your first draft of your narrative on time. Okay, it's very, very important, and really, a lot of people did not turn in their week 3 reflection, which really surprised me, because most people did turn in the week 2 reflection. Very few people actually, out of somewhere around 90 students, only about, say, 15 out of that 90 for the week 2 reflection either didn't turn it in or turned it in late. Whereas week 3, that number was like tripled or quadrupled. I don't know what was going on, but it's clear. The syllabus is very clear. Turning something in on time to get a complete. I was lax on that with the week 2s because it was the first assignment, but to get a complete on something, right, you've got to turn it in on time. You have until 2 days afterwards to get a late on it. Okay. After that, you get what's called a missing. That's extremely detrimental, right, to your overall grade in the class. That a missing counts as 2 lates. Okay, and you can remember you can only have 4 lates and maintain an A, right? So it's very, very essential to success in the class to get everything in on time, or at the very least within 2 days of it being due, right? Which means if you have something that's due on a Saturday, which everything is due on a Saturday, unless it's otherwise specifically stated. And I think there's only, and the only assignments that aren't due on Saturdays are going to be like the final exam and stuff like that. And we're not even to that point yet. Okay, so your assignments are due on Saturday. That means that if you don't turn it in on Saturday, you have until Monday. You have till Monday night to turn it in to get a late on it. Okay, and you have 4 lates that you can get before it costs you a letter grade. Okay, if you don't turn an assignment in at all, that's automatically a letter grade. Okay, and then if you miss that 2-day deadline for the late, you have 2 weeks to turn it in to get a missing, and a missing is worth 2 lates, right? Which means you can only get 2 of those, right, and maintain your A. Now there could be extenuating circumstances, and if there are, I need to know about it, because I always have discretion, right? I can say, okay, okay, I will consider this, I'll take something into consideration. To let me know about it, don't text me about it, don't email me about it. What you do is you put that circumstance in the comment to me on the submission page. Okay, there's a place when you submit your document to me, there's a place that's feedback to the instructor. You type in there what's going on, why you didn't turn in your material on time. I have discretion. I can say, okay, I'm going to consider this on time, or I'm going to consider it late when it's actually missing, and that's my discretion. Doesn't mean that I'm going to. It means that I can. So, but that's how you communicate that to me. Because if you try to text it to me, if you try to email it to me, especially if you turn something in 3 or 4 days after you text me or email it to me, or it's 3 or 4 days before I'm able to look at it, I may not, it may not register with me. So it needs to be in that feedback box, okay? So that when I look at your document, I can say, oh yes, okay, this person is dealing with this, or such and such, right? So that's what needs to happen. If you want the state of your work to be considered, right? But to avoid all that, to avoid anything like that, as I said, in my explanation of the syllabus video and so forth at the very beginning, turn everything in absolutely on time. Okay, whenever and all possible, because the ultimate right, the ultimate demonstration of labor is your capacity to turn everything in complete and on time. Okay. Why? Because we all know that takes effort, that takes ingenuity, that takes planning, and all these things to actually be able to do stuff on time and complete, right? And I've taught business communication, and far and above anything else, what employers want is they want folks who can show up on time. And they want folks who, who can show up on time and who can meet deadlines. They don't care about pretty much anything else, because most employers can train people to do what they need them to do, but they can't necessarily teach people how to show up on time, and so forth. So really, it demonstrates a whole lot when you turn in your stuff on time, when you turn in your stuff complete. Okay, I don't mean to be on this soapbox, so to speak, but this is how the course is set up. This is how the course is indicated in the syllabus. So you all need to be aware of that. But again, if something comes up, you know, because stuff, particularly, you know, now in the circumstances under which we are living, right? If something comes up, communicate that to me in that text box when you submit your item, right? When you submit your work, uh, so that I can see clearly, okay, this is what's going on. This is why this piece is 3 days late, okay, or 4 days late, or whatever, right? And I can make that assessment. Okay, I'm gonna count this as late instead of missing, or I'm gonna, you know, or I'm gonna count it as on time in special circumstances, whatever. Okay, but indicate that to me in that text box when you submit your material. The other thing I want to mention is you need to be submitting your work as PDF files or .docx files. Please don't uh, cut and paste your material and put it in the submission box. Okay. A lot of people did that, and I understand that the week 2 is our first assignment. That's fine, but please don't make that a habit, because when you do that, you lose all your formatting. It's just not a great way to do it. Everyone, as Tamusa students, you have access to Microsoft 365, so really everyone should be using .docx files. If someone conned you into buying a Chromebook, I apologize. That Chromebooks are horrible for a number of reasons. But you know, I absolutely hate Google Docs. I don't, you know, and Google for the primary reason that Google Docs and Blackboard do not interact. Okay, so don't attempt under any circumstances to post anything related to a Google Doc to Blackboard, or, you know, to send me a link to a Google Doc or anything like that, because it just doesn't work. What you have to do if you're using a Google Doc, you've got to save that you have to indicate to Google Docs that you want to save your work as a PDF. Okay, and you've got to save your PDF that you generate through Google Docs. You've got to save that to your hard drive. Okay, and then not through Google Docs, but through Adobe Acrobat, which is free. You then open it through Adobe Acrobat to make sure that it actually opens, that it actually functions as a PDF. Okay. You've got it, you know, but someone tricked you into buying a Chromebook, and I'm sorry about that. Chromebooks and Tamusa don't function. Chromebook is incompatible with the work that we do here, and I understand nobody told you that. And I've been trying to tell admissions for 2 years that they need to get on that. That they need to have official recommendations for you know, computers and so forth that you need. Frankly, you need a Surface. Okay, that's the best. That's the best you can get is a Surface to work with Blackboard. That's like the most portable and so forth is a Surface Pro. You know, but and they should tell you that. They should straight up tell you that, and they don't, and I apologize for that. So so anyway, that's that. And to get the if you're using a Google Doc, to get the and you've got to test. Like I said, you have to test to see if that PDF actually generates. Because I know for a fact a couple people tried to link Google Docs to their submissions. Tried to link a Google Doc as their submission, and Blackboard said Nope. And I went ahead and I gave credit to a couple of people because I understood what they were trying to do, but I can't do that throughout the semester. I have to be able to look at your writing in a convenient manner. Okay. And there were a couple of people I cut slack to, and I said, okay, I understand that you try to submit something, so I'm going to go ahead and give you credit. I cannot do that throughout the term. I did that on the first assignment because it was the first assignment, right? Okay. And, you know, and I hope that I'm not an asshole, you know, and I, you know, in terms that, I mean, I'm sure, I know I'm an asshole in several aspects of my life. A lot of us are, but I hope that I'm not an asshole in this way. Right. So I try to extend, some courtesy and some understanding with regard to that, particularly with the first assignment. So anyway, that's the clerical stuff. Clerical as in, you know, pen to paper, not clerical as in, you know, as in religious. I don't look at this. I don't look upon this as, I look upon, you know, this as a vocation. I don't necessarily look upon this as, you know, as liturgical in any fashion. Anyway, um, pun, if you will, play on words, what have you. Now, talking about the narrative essay. Any questions right now as to the narrative essay? Because that's really the main thing that we have coming up, that's due this week, aside from the reflections. But I think you all probably have a handle on the reflections at this point. But the narrative essay, what is anybody's feelings on that? From what I've read on the reflections, a lot of you have some really great ideas, some strong feelings about that. But anything specific that anybody wants to ask with regard to the narrative essay? Let's see. Let's look at our. None of you have any specific things you want to ask about the narrative essay, so I'll just you know, a friend of mine who's a communications person, right, is telling me that on these calls I should facilitate conversation by asking you things like, you know, what is your favorite ice cream and crap like that. I mean, we could do that, but I, you know, I would just assume streamline everything. It's bad enough, or I should say challenging enough, that you'll, you know, have to sort of sift through my babblings, if you will, let alone, you know, discussions about one's favorite ice cream and things like that. So anyway, so the narrative essay, what I've done, if you've been on Blackboard, and again, I'm preaching to the choir. So in other words, you know, you all are the ones that showed up on the call to get this information in real time. So you all are very conscientious students. So I'm sure that you've been on Blackboard and you see that there are 10, I put 10 sample student essays on Blackboard. And these will give you an idea of some of the directions that you can go in with regard to the essay. Now, these are more of the sort of identity options of the who I am narrative. They're not sort of the conflict resolution types of essays. And again, because again, remember, I put 2 options for you. If you have another sort of idea, another sort of direction that you're going or that you're thinking about, you can always text me and ask me, you know, what do you think of this idea? And I can kind of give my feedback on it in that way. So, but you'll see in those essays different ways that students have sort of approached that idea of the who I am narrative, or the significant event that sort of shaped the way that they think, that they sort of frame themselves and frame their lives and so forth. So in pretty much all those those examples, you know, you get sort of a focused lens, right, into that. The latter 5 essays that are on there, they deal more with how language prompted that kind of realization, which is also a direction you can take. You know, so, but the idea, generally speaking, with narrative, and this is brought forth in the storytelling essay that I had assigned also, is that one way to look at your role, right, as the storyteller or as the author, right, is that of the director, right? If we're going to make an analogy with film, okay, so the role of the film director is that the film director is responsible for everything that an audience sees or doesn't see, right? Because the film director is responsible for where the camera goes and what shows up in that camera, right? So you can look at your text on the page as a camera lens, right? And so you're basically determining exactly what the audience sees or doesn't see. Now, that in and of itself is a misnomer, right? Because, or that is to say, it's not an all-encompassing statement, because as we know from looking at film, to use that example again, that two people could see the exact same movie, right, and have completely different reactions to it. You know, why? Because each of us is bringing different experiences with us when we view something, or when we read something, right? So that, you know, two people can go and see Rise of Skywalker, for example, and have completely opposite reactions to it, you know, because they're bringing with them different expectations. They're bringing with them different relationships, right, to the Star Wars saga, for example, or maybe even to specific actors, or maybe even to the specific means by which they saw the thing, right? So, for example, the theater in which you saw it, or the living room in which you saw it. Maybe you saw it with an ex, right? So when you think of that movie now, you're like, damn, you know, I saw that next to that person, and oh, yeah, I can still smell that person's armpits when I'm thinking about it. I don't, you know, so you have a connection with that film that's not good. It doesn't necessarily have to do with the quality of the film itself, but that's what you brought with those, part of your experience, right? So the same, my point is, the same can be said, you know, when we read something. So the idea is that no two people are going to read something exactly the same. And you know, we can even go so far as to say that no one person is going to read something the same way twice, right? Because we're actually, we each time that we read something, we bring slightly different experiences with us, okay? So that the creation of narrative is actually a cooperative effort between the author of the text, or the director, if we're using the film example, and the reader or the audience, okay? So you, as the author of this narrative, you know, think about when you're writing this narrative, to whom are you writing? For whom are you writing, right? Please don't let it be me, because, you know, first of all, you don't know me that well. You don't know how I'm going to react to something, and so on and so forth. You know, you've had very little interaction with me, you know. But are you writing this for a particular community, right? Are you writing this for, your family? Are you writing this, for whom are you writing this? To whom do you want to reach with this narrative, right? I mean, clearly, for example, in Only Daughter, a lot of you resonated either positively or negatively with that piece. Clearly, in Only Daughter, Cisneros is writing for, she's probably writing for, I would say she's writing for two groups of people. One, she's writing for young Mexican American women who grew up in a similar situation to her, right? Had this whole sort of tradition versus a desire to break away from that tradition, right? Or to not, I should say, to not be defined by that tradition. Plus, Sandra Cisneros clearly is an academic. In fact, she teaches in San Antonio. I believe she teaches at Our Lady of the Lake. But so in one sense, she's writing for other academics, who may not be of Hispanic origin or Mexican American origin, or who may not even be women, right? To give them a window into what it was like for her and to how she struggled in ways that maybe they didn't. That's clearly the case for Gloria Anzaldúa. If you listened to or watched How to Tame a Wild Tongue, or read How to Tame a Wild Tongue, that piece is incredibly intense and does not pull any punches, which is why I love it. I love, it's one of my favorite pieces because it makes me feel uncomfortable, right? And it can be said that if we go through life never feeling uncomfortable, never questioning our assumptions, that we don't grow. If we even think about the process of planting seeds, for example, to use a metaphor, to plant a seed, the first thing you got to do is break the ground, right? Is to till the ground, and that piece breaks one's assumptions, particularly if one is male Caucasian American, right? Who's never necessarily had to question these types of assumptions. Now, given the environment that we live in 2020, if one still has not questioned one's assumptions about ethnicity and about power, and even about language in America in 2020, just by turning on the news, right? One must be living in sort of a very insular environment, and I seriously doubt anyone attending a public university falls into that category. But this piece by Anzaldúa, she was doing this. She was putting that out there. These things out there in 1990. I mean, this piece is written in 1990. So none of these issues that we see sort of at the forefront of today's discussions with regard to race, with regard to power, with regard to all of these things. None of this is new, right? It wasn't even new when Anzaldúa wrote about it. As she points out, right? These issues go back hundreds of years, even thousands of years. I mean, and so forth. So, in any case, but she, it's her piece is a slightly different approach to storytelling, but she's still telling a story. She's telling a story about her interaction with language, and her interaction with identity, what her identity is. For her identity is inseparable from her language, right? To defame her language is to defame her, and so, and granted, I'll just say this right now. I'm not expecting you to write like Gloria Anzaldúa. I'm not expecting you to write like Amy Tan or like Sandra Cisneros. I can't write like Sandra Cisneros or okay. If I could, you know, I would have a much higher opinion of a healthier opinion of myself probably, and so would a lot of other people. But and I'd probably have I'd have a much healthier bank account, to tell you the truth. But so I'm not expecting you to write like them. I'm expecting you to write like you. I'm expecting you to write like you. But what I'm hoping is that their techniques, their expressions, are inspiring you. And more to the point, I'm hoping that these sample essays, right, that are written by students, mostly written by freshmen, you know, 18, 19, 17, 18, 19-year-old, sometimes 16, 17, 18, 19-year-old students, right, like yourselves, okay, that you can look at those and you can say, wow, you know, this person did that. I can do that, or wow, you know, I can see where this person's coming from and so forth. So that's my point here. Let's see, what time are we doing this? Okay, I got 20 minutes. So in the next 20 minutes, and we could potentially go over at some point. I don't want to make a habit of that simply because I want to respect your time. I want to respect your time and the time that you're actually taking to be on this call. So being on the call in and of itself is labor with the course, right? You can talk about being, you can talk about being on this call, for example, in your reflections, okay? Because I do understand that to be on a Zoom call, you got to plan your day around it. Some days I'm on like 3 Zoom calls, okay, and a lot of them are an hour, hour and a half or more, okay, and it's not just some of them are related to our efforts here at SAMUSA. Some of them are related to I'm on the board for a couple of nonprofits, right? So and if you're if this is a stereotype, and something about stereotypes is a lot of times stereotypes. I'm not talking about racial stereotypes. I'm not talking about stereotypes about gender or anything like that, or sexual orientation or anything like that. But a lot of behavioral stereotypes, right, are rooted in some reality. And the stereotype of being on a committee is that people just generally talk in circles and don't get anything accomplished. And I have to tell you, I'm on a couple of committees like that, and so so meetings can drag on and on, right? But my point is that you have to be in a situation like that. You have to schedule your life around that, and I understand that. Like some of you are working like crazy freaking hours. I mean, from what you've told me in your reflections, just like crazy hours. Taken like 6 courses in some cases. That's unbelievable. I mean, my lazy ass only ever took 4. My lazy ass only ever took 12 hours in a semester, let alone 15, 18 out. It's unbelievable, so I understand this, right? I understand that. I don't understand it, okay, necessarily, because in the true meaning of the term understanding means that you have one has a complete and total grasp of something. I don't have a complete and total grasp of it because I haven't experienced it necessarily in the way that you were experiencing. But I will say that I respect it. I respect it. I respect what you're going, what you're undertaking, and I empathize with what you're having to put into it. So again, talk about these things in your reflections. I am not here to screw up your GPA. Quite the opposite. Quite the opposite. Quite the opposite. I am in your corner as much as I possibly can be. Okay, I want to see everyone succeed, right? The way that you succeed turn everything in on time, turn everything in complete. And when you can't do that because of circumstances, communicate with me what those circumstances are. Okay, so that so that I can look at it, so that I can assess it, right? Okay, back to the narrative essay. So basically in the narrative essay, if I were to tell you, there is no magic formula, right? First of all, there is no magic formula for the narrative essay. Okay, but basically the idea is, see, I'm going to contradict myself. I say there's no magical formula, but then I'm going to basically give you a structure. But you can toss that structure because it's not magic. You know, it's you know, in other words, you could totally toss and say, I don't want to do what he said, which is fantastic because you're probably smarter than me. Okay, you're probably and again, you probably have more insight into your own. Yeah, I know you have more insight into your own story than I do. Right? Because I don't know your story, not yet, right? And just because I read an essay about your story doesn't mean that I know your story, right? It means that I have a slight window into your story, right? And the idea is the power, and I talked a little bit about this last week, right? In last week's check-in, you know, the idea is that through metaphor, through the communication of the unfamiliar through the familiar, right, that one can get a window into somebody else's experience and thereby identify a little bit with that experience and thereby develop empathy, right? Because empathy is ultimately a function of the imagination. In other words, one has to be able to imagine oneself in the position of somebody else in order to empathize with that person, right? And that's what narrative does. It brings people closer together in that way, okay? And I just want to break it down real quick, and then I'll get back to the narrative essay. I apologize for that freaking book you got. And this is going to be recorded on the internet, and I know I'm going to catch flack for this, but I apologize for that freaking book you guys have to read in University 1301, that book on elections and what. That is the driest book. I'm sorry. I'm not on that committee. I don't have anything to do with it, but I apologize that you're actually having to read that book. And I'm a person who 100% fervently believes in elections. I believe everybody who is eligible to vote should vote. Because otherwise, the system doesn't work. Even with the restrictions on voting that we have, even with gerrymandering, even with all the various forms of voter suppression, which are very real. Oh, thanks. Ashley says we appreciate your sympathy. Okay, I'm glad somebody does. But yeah, everyone should vote and everyone should participate in our procedure, right? And honestly, they put more onus on us with every election because now, for example, party affiliations are not included with the candidates. I mean, when you actually go into vote, it doesn't list anybody's party affiliation. Used to. The last two elections, I believe, like the last couple of years, no party affiliations are listed. So you can't, you have to be aware of who candidates are and what their positions are and so forth. The onus is more on the voter, right? So they don't make it easy at all. Voting is by no means easy, and voting places are, voting's been made more difficult in certain areas based on who lives there and so on. Now we can vote on campus. We can vote in the Mace Center. But anyway, my point is that I firmly believe in participation, right, in the process. However, that book, I tried. I could. And I know you, and I know some of you, you're probably gonna have to do assignments based on that book, so you're at least gonna have to like fudge it a little bit and try to. But basically, what that book does is it tries to present a nonpartisan look at voter reform, at election reform, and it's just it's I don't know. I couldn't get into it. I couldn't get into it, and I really tried. So my apologies for that book. Again, they're not going to put me on that committee because I'm going to pick something that's got motherfucker in it. And and I think they're trying to be very PG with their selections and stuff. I I I am not. I would push for something far more edgy. But again, that's me. Uh, anyway, so the idea with the narrative essay, right, is you're using metaphor to create this picture, right, this vision of a very focused. The more focused you can get your event that you're describing, the better off it's going to be, because the more fuel, if you will, your audience has to get into that event. If you're just glossing over like 6 events, that's not really a narrative, right? That's not a story. That's um, kind of just that's more like a log than a story. A story is focused, even if it's short. Like for example, Only Daughter is really short, but it is very focused. It's focused on that particular relationship, her relationship with her father, and what she feels about it. So on the one hand, you have the narration of the actual event. On the other, you have, your feelings about it. How do you feel about it? How are you framing this? Why exactly has this event been so central to you? What about it has been transformative for you, right? Okay, that's really what you have to convey. That's the central question. There's the event itself, which you should narrate, and you should get into the details of, and you should integrate dialogue, for example. You should integrate description and that stuff. If remember, I included a video on adding dialogue to narrative. I believe it was in the week 2 folder. So you want to go in there and you want to look at that. You want to look at that video, give that video 15-20 minute video, but you want to take a look at that. And but the idea is also make sure that you explain in your piece why and how that event was transformative to you, because somebody might read something and go, I don't get it. I don't get why missing this particular bus on this particular day was so important. I don't get it. So the idea is then, explain to your reader why that was so meaningful, or so transformative to you, right? Why does that stick with you? So that, and again, that's not much of a structure, right? But it's something. It's the general idea, right? The general idea is that you tell your story, and then you explain the meaning of the story, right, from your perspective. Okay. So, and again, in this initial draft, the goal, right, the goal for completeness is somewhere around 3 pages. Okay. So if I were to, and a lot of you mentioned in your reflections, for example, that procrastination is a fact. And again, you know, I may not be speaking to those individuals right now live on the call um, because you all are the students who were actually able to um, put the time aside and actually make it on this call, which I thoroughly appreciate, because I'm not simply talking to the air right now. But no, I mean, to, procrastination is a major factor in my life, has been since since the first grade, you know, for me. So no, I totally sympathize with that, and so forth. So basically, if I were to plan out my week, if I had two assignments due, right, in a class, which you guys have two assignments due this week, I would try to like knock out the narrative probably earlier than later. I've already had one submitted today. I probably try to knock that out earlier than later, and then do your reflection, because after you've done the narrative, you've got a lot to reflect about. Maybe writing the narrative was particularly difficult, or not. Maybe it just flows out and so forth. But really, the key to not just succeeding with online instruction, or online or distance learning and so forth. And frankly, I've taught online before. I actually like it. I've had students, in Kuwait, like I've had students like on deployment taking my classes, doing their essays at like 3 a.m., on deployment and things like that. And I've had all kinds of really interesting experiences with students all over the country taking classes online. And my point being that the facility now with Zoom is so much better. When I taught online before, I think the last time I taught online was, I want to say 2012, something like that, 2012, 2013. And the technology is so much better, so much more reliable. The experience that you all are having is far and above what students got just even not that many years before. So, and I understand it's disappointing, right? Because you think about, oh, my freshman year, I'm supposed to be, having this grand adventure and so forth. And in many ways, you are making history, right? The last pandemic that we had was on this scale was, like was it 1918, right? So you're making history, so in that way, this is a grand adventure. And we have that past few years of Temusa have been like that. I mean, my first year here was 2016 with the first freshman class. And if you ask those students, why Temusa, right? Why Texas A&M San Antonio? And several students said, we're the first. We get to be the first, and those students just graduated, right? You know, and so you all are a new set of pioneers, and it takes courage, right? Courage doesn't mean you're not afraid. Courage means that you do shit even though you are afraid, right? You do and I and I deeply respect that. And so this semester in many ways is not going to be easy, but as best as possible, just try to plan things out. And the thing about planning is you can plan everything out to the T, and then plans fall through because chaos, right? But try to take as much as you can, try to plan things out. And I think as we move forward, it is going to become easier. Right? It is going to become easier. And I'm not just speaking about this class. This class is a cakewalk, right, compared to some of the classes you're taking. I mean, and I don't mean to disparage my own class. I specifically design it not to be difficult, right? because I design it to facilitate creativity, right? But some of you are taking like organic, somebody's taking organic chemistry. My God, as a freshman, that class is a notorious weed out class. In other words, that class is, I don't know about it's a Musa, but at my university, that class was the class that was made intentionally hard to weed out pre-med students. In other words, students that they felt didn't have what it took to be pre-med. So they made organic chemistry really hard so that students would basically drop it, who didn't have the skill set, to continue in that. And somebody was like, "Oh, I'm taking organic chemistry." And I'm like, "What? Okay." That's amazing. That's amazing to me. So yeah. So and frankly, and I'm just going to break this down to you. I took college algebra 3 times. I can't imagine taking college algebra in a pandemic. I mean, good God, right? So I apologize. I don't mean to defame deity by saying good God and that sort of thing. And in fact, and you can even, so did you know that technically speaking, a curse word or a cuss word, right? That is something that specifically defames the deity, right? A word like motherfucker, that's an expletive. That is not a cuss word. That's an expletive. Totally different, completely categorically different, right? So if you defame a deity, that's a cuss word, okay? If you say motherfucker or shit or whatever, that's an expletive. Totally different, completely different. Ask your priest, right? Or ask your liturgical official, right? Knowing is half the battle. G.I. Joe, right? Okay. With that, I just aged myself. Actually, we're actually over time. Interestingly, I know the writer of G. I don't know as in intimately, but I am acquainted with, on a first name basis, with the writer of the G.I. Joes and Transformers cartoons from back in the day. He's actually a fantastic guy. But anyway, so any questions before we log off? I apologize for keeping you like 2 minutes over. Any questions? Nope. Okay, hopefully you got something out of this talk. And again, next week I will resume with the Monday and the Tuesday. I just didn't want to do a talk yesterday because it's a holiday, and I figured that a lot of people are going to be doing stuff with family and whatever. So, all right, have a fantastic week. Please don't hesitate to reach out to me if you need to. All right. Wait, is there something on the chat that I missed? No, it's okay, good. All right. I will see you all later. Thank you so much.